The sound of a child choking cut through the quiet night. Emma Lucy dropped everything and ran toward Ethan Foster's room. The door was half open, the lights dim, and the boy sat up in bed coughing hard, his small hands gripping the sheets. "Ethan, breathe, baby, breathe," she whispered, rushing to him. She lifted him gently, her hands shaking, trying to clear his airway. The cup of water on the table trembled as she reached for it. Then, before she could take another step, she felt a sting at the back of her arm. Her body froze. The cup fell, water spilling across the floor. The room spun. She tried to turn, but her voice came out weak. "Who's there?" No one answered. Her knees gave way, and she collapsed beside the child's bed. Her hand stretched toward Ethan's small face as darkness closed in. A few seconds later, Margaret, the housekeeper, ran in screaming, "Oh my God, someone call the ambulance." Moments after that, Robert Foster burst through the door. His heart sank at the sight his son gasping weakly on the bed, and Emma lying unconscious on the floor beside him. Margaret pointed with shaking hands, pretending to cry. "She was alone with him, sir. She must have done something." Robert's eyes filled with shock and confusion. He lifted his son in his arms, shouting for help, while the woman who had just risked her life to save the boy lay still at his feet. He didn't know it yet, but what he was about to discover would tear his heart apart. The ambulance siren echoed through the long driveway of the Foster mansion. Blue and red lights flashed against the white walls, painting the night with panic. Guards opened the main doors, letting the paramedics rush in. Robert Foster stood frozen beside his son's bed. His hand trembled as he brushed Ethan's forehead, whispering his name. The boy's breathing was slow, shallow, but still there. Beside the bed, Emma Lucy lay motionless, her dark uniform soaked where the water had spilled. Her skin looked pale, and her fingers twitched faintly. "She was the only one here, Margaret," the housekeeper said in a shaking voice. "I told you, sir. Something was off about her. I warned you." Robert turned his face toward her, confusion and fear clouding his eyes. "You think she hurt him?" he asked quietly, his voice rough. Margaret hesitated just long enough to sound believable. "I don't know, sir, but I found her on the floor like this, and the boy almost stopped breathing. What else could it be?" Robert swallowed hard. He wanted to deny it, but his mind couldn't make sense of what he was seeing. Emma had always been gentle, always patient with Ethan. But now, seeing her lying there beside his sick child, his heart filled with anger he didn't understand. "Take her out," he said sharply, "and get my son to the hospital." Two paramedics lifted Ethan from the bed, placing a small oxygen mask on his face. Another knelt beside Emma, checking her pulse. "She's alive," he said softly, "but she's been injected with something." Robert's head snapped toward him. "Injected? What do you mean?" "There's a mark on her arm, sir, like a needle prick." Margaret quickly stepped in. Maybe she tried something on the boy and it backfired. These people use strange things sometimes. You never really know their kind. Robert didn't answer. He only stood there, staring at the mark on Emma's arm. His chest tightened, anger burning under his skin. He wanted to ask questions, but fear pushed him to move. "Just take them both," he said quietly. "Now." The paramedics hurried out with Ethan and Emma on separate stretchers. The sirens started again, fading into the distance as the vehicles left. When the silence returned, Robert stood alone in the doorway of the child's room. The spilled cup, the broken pieces of glass, the small blanket half off the bed, it all looked like the remains of a storm. He sat on the edge of the bed, pressing his hands together. His son had been his only reason to live after his wife's death, and now, even that small piece felt like it was slipping away. Margaret stepped closer, pretending to comfort him. "You did the right thing, sir. You've always been too kind. People like her can't be trusted." Robert didn't look at her. He just nodded slowly, staring at the door. Somewhere deep inside, something didn't feel right, but the noise in his mind was too loud to hear it. At the hospital, the halls smelled of medicine and fear. The bright lights made everything feel cold. Robert sat outside the emergency room, his hands clasped tightly together. Through the small window, he could see Ethan lying on a bed, small wires running from his chest. A doctor moved around him, adjusting a tube. "How is he?" Robert asked as soon as the doctor stepped out. "He's stable for now," the doctor replied. "We'll need to keep him under observation. His oxygen levels dropped dangerously low, but he's strong." Robert let out a shaky breath. "And the maid?" The doctor looked at his clipboard. "She's unconscious, but alive. There's evidence of a sedative in her system. We don't know who gave it to her, but it was strong." Robert frowned. "A sedative?" "Yes. It's possible she was attacked, but we can't say for sure until she wakes up." Margaret, standing beside him, quickly spoke up. "Doctor, could it be that she injected herself and the boy by mistake?" The doctor paused. "There's no sign of that yet. We'll run more tests." Robert's jaw tightened. "Keep me updated," he said quietly. As the doctor left, Margaret leaned closer to Robert. "Sir, I know this is painful, but you must face it. Sometimes, people like her do desperate things. Maybe she was trying to help, but didn't know what she was doing." Robert rubbed his temples, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. "I trusted her with my child. She fooled us all," Margaret whispered. Her words sank into his mind like poison. Robert stood up, straightened his jacket, and walked toward the glass again. He looked at Ethan, then at the empty bed beside him, where Emma was being treated. For a moment, he almost stepped inside, almost looked at her face, but he stopped himself. "Make sure she's sent away after she wakes up," he said coldly. "I don't want her near my son again." Margaret nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." Hours later, Emma opened her eyes slowly. The bright lights above her burned, her body felt heavy, her arm ached, and her memory was blurry. She turned her head weakly and whispered, "Ethan." A nurse beside her smiled kindly. "He's okay, ma'am. You saved his life." Emma blinked slowly, trying to make sense of it. "Saved?" "Yes," the nurse said, adjusting her pillow. "He was barely breathing when you held him. The doctor said if you hadn't reacted so fast, he might not have survived." Tears gathered in Emma's eyes. She smiled weakly, relief washing over her. "Thank God," she whispered. But before she could ask another question, two men in black suits walked into the room. "Emma? Lucy?" one of them said flatly. She nodded slowly. "You're to leave the hospital once you're cleared. Mr. Foster has ended your employment. You'll be compensated for the month." Emma stared at them, her lips trembling. "Ended? I didn't do anything wrong. The boy was choking. I tried to help him. One of the men cut her off. "We're only following instructions." Her throat tightened. She looked at the nurse, but the nurse only gave her a helpless look. When the men left, Emma turned her face toward the window. The city lights outside blurred through her tears. She pressed her palm against her chest and whispered, "I did everything I could." Back at the mansion, Robert sat in the dark, staring at the fire in the living room. Margaret brought him a cup of tea, her tone calm. "You made the right choice, sir. You have to protect your son." Robert nodded slowly, though his face showed no peace. Outside, the rain began again, soft and cold. The mansion, once full of silence, now carried something heavier: guilt, suspicion, and a truth waiting to be found. And far across town, in a small hospital bed, Emma Lucy lay awake with tears on her cheeks, whispering the same name again and again, Ethan. She didn't know it yet, but this night, the night she was accused and cast away, was only the beginning of a truth that would soon shake the entire Foster mansion to its core. Morning light slipped through the hospital curtains. Emma Lucy sat on the edge of the bed, her arm still weak, her heart even weaker. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan gasping for breath, and the shadow that came from behind before everything went dark. She pressed her hand against the mark on her arm. It still hurt, not just from the sting, but from what followed. The nurse entered quietly with a tray. "You're lucky to be alive," she said softly. "The doctor said you were injected with a heavy sedative. Someone wanted to knock you out completely." Emma looked up slowly, her voice breaking. "Someone did that to me?" The nurse nodded. "Yes, but the police weren't called. Mr. Foster's people handled everything privately." Emma's lips trembled. "And Ethan? The little boy?" "He's recovering. He's been moved to a private wing. His father hasn't left his side." Emma lowered her head. "He thinks I hurt his son." The nurse hesitated, unsure of what to say. "Sometimes the truth takes time," she finally said before leaving the room. Emma sat still for a long time. The sound of her own breathing filled the space. She looked around the small white room and whispered to herself, "I did nothing wrong." Tears rolled down her cheeks. She knew she couldn't go back to the mansion, not after what happened, but she also knew deep in her heart that someone wanted her gone. At that moment, a soft knock came on the door. A woman in a brown coat stepped in, holding a clipboard. "Miss Lucy?" she asked gently. "Yes. My name is Dr. Naomi Ellis. I'm a child therapist. I was called to check on Ethan Foster's emotional condition. I reviewed some of the home camera footage." Emma looked up, surprised. "Footage?" Naomi nodded. "Yes. There were cameras in the hallway near Ethan's room. I saw what happened that night." She walked closer and sat beside Emma. "You ran into the room when you heard him choking. You didn't hurt him. You saved him." Emma's heart jumped. "You saw it?" "I did," Naomi said quietly. "You held him until he could breathe again. Then someone came behind you. The camera only caught a hand. It looked like a woman's hand." Emma's voice broke. "Margaret. She was the only one there." Naomi's eyes softened. "I can't say for sure yet, but I'll tell Mr. Foster what I found. He deserves to know the truth." Emma gripped her hand tightly. "Please, tell him everything. I don't care about my job. I just want him to know I never hurt his child." Naomi smiled faintly. "I promise." When she left, Emma lay back on the bed, whispering a quiet prayer. Her chest hurt, but for the first time since that terrible night, a small light flickered inside her heart. Someone finally believed her. At the mansion, Robert Foster sat in his study, staring at the security report in his hands. He hadn't slept all night. His son was sleeping in the next room, stable but still weak. The words of Margaret kept replaying in his mind, but something inside him refused to rest. He leaned back in his chair and whispered, "Why would she do it?" His assistant entered quietly. "Sir, Dr. Naomi Ellis is here to see you." Robert nodded. "Send her in." Naomi walked in calmly, holding a small tablet. "Mr. Foster, I came to discuss what I found." Robert gestured for her to sit. "Go ahead." She placed the tablet on the table and pressed play. The screen showed the hallway outside Ethan's room. The timestamp was from the night before. They saw Emma rushing in after hearing the sound of coughing. A few seconds later, a shadow moved near the door. A woman's figure stepped forward, her hand reaching into the room, then quickly pulling back. Robert leaned closer. "Who is that?" Naomi paused the video. "The camera angle isn't clear, but the clothing and build look like the housekeeper's." Robert's face went pale. "Margaret?" Naomi nodded gently. "It's possible. And notice this, sir." She zoomed in. "Emma didn't touch your son until after he started choking. She was helping him. There's no sign of aggression, only care." Robert sat back slowly, his hands covering his face. Silence filled the room for several seconds. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and heavy. "All this time, I thought." He stopped himself. "I wronged her." Naomi spoke softly. "She nearly lost her life trying to save your boy. The injection was meant for her, not Ethan. Someone wanted to frame her." Robert stood up, pacing the floor. "She was right there, unconscious, and I blamed her. God, what have I done?" Naomi closed the tablet. "She deserves the truth, Mr. Foster, and she deserves your apology." Robert looked out the large window. the morning sun glinting off the rain-soaked glass. His voice was distant. "Where is she now?" "She's still in the hospital, alone." Robert nodded slowly. "I'll go to her." Later that afternoon, Robert walked through the hospital corridors. His steps were slow, his eyes tired. The nurse pointed him toward Emma's room. When he reached the door, he paused, looking through the small window. She was sitting by the bed, folding her hands, her face calm but sad. He walked in quietly. Emma looked up, surprised. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them carried more weight than words. Robert finally said, "I came to say I'm sorry." Emma looked down, her voice barely a whisper. "You thought I hurt him." "I know," he said softly. "I was wrong. You saved my son." He took a breath and stepped closer. "The cameras showed what really happened. I saw everything." Tears filled Emma's eyes. She tried to speak, but couldn't. Robert continued, his voice trembling slightly. "I fired Margaret this morning. She won't come near this house again. I've started an investigation to find out who helped her. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I had to tell you I'm sorry." Emma wiped her tears slowly. "All I ever wanted was to protect Ethan. I would never hurt him." Robert nodded. "I know that now. And I owe you more than an apology. I owe you a chance to start again." She looked at him carefully. "A chance?" "I want you back at the mansion," he said quietly. "Not as a maid, but as Ethan's caregiver. You're the only one he trusts." Emma hesitated. "After all that happened?" He lowered his voice. "Please, Emma. My son needs you, and maybe I do too." She turned her face toward the window. The city looked far away, peaceful, like a world she didn't belong to anymore. "I'll come back," she said finally, her voice soft but steady. "But not for you, Mr. Foster. For Ethan." Robert nodded with respect. "That's enough for me." As he left the room, Emma looked down at her hands. They were trembling, but not from fear anymore. Somewhere deep inside, she felt strength returning. She didn't know what waited at that mansion, but she knew one thing: she would face it with truth, no matter how painful it became. Back in his car, Robert sat quietly as the driver pulled away from the hospital. His reflection in the glass looked older, sadder. He whispered to himself, "How many more lies have I believed?" And far behind him, in a dark corner of the mansion, Margaret sat packing her bags, her face cold and bitter. On her table lay a phone, and a message glowing on the screen from an unknown number. "You failed. But it's not over yet." The sound of her slow laugh echoed in the empty room, a sound that promised the peace inside the Foster mansion would not last for long. The evening sky hung low over the Foster mansion. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of storm and silence. The tall, white building stood quiet, like it was holding its breath for what was about to come. A black car rolled slowly through the gates. Inside sat Emma Lucy, her hands folded tightly on her lap. She hadn't been here since the night she was carried out unconscious. Now, every part of her wanted to turn back. But one thought kept her steady, Ethan. When the car stopped, she stepped out slowly. The soft wind brushed her face. 2 new guards stood by the front door. Their eyes followed her, unsure of who she was. One of them opened the door after receiving a call from Robert Foster himself. The grand hallway looked the same, but it felt different. The same paintings hung on the walls, the same chandelier glowed above, but the air carried something heavier now: guilt and quiet sorrow. Robert was waiting at the bottom of the staircase. He wasn't wearing a suit this time, just a gray shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His face looked tired, his eyes softer. "Emma," he said quietly. She nodded slightly. "Mr. Foster." For a few seconds, neither of them moved. The sound of a clock ticking filled the silence. "Ethan's upstairs," he said. "He's been asking for you." Emma's lips parted, but no words came out. She only nodded again and slowly walked toward the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. When she reached the boy's room, her eyes filled with tears. Ethan was sitting up in bed, his small face pale but smiling when he saw her. "Emma," he whispered. Her heart broke in two. She knelt beside him, holding his hand gently. "Oh, sweetheart," she said softly. "I missed you." "I missed you too," he said weakly. "Where did you go?" She brushed his hair back carefully. "I had to rest, baby, but I'm here now. I won't leave you again." Behind her, Robert stood in the doorway, watching them. For the first time in years, his eyes filled with something he didn't recognize: peace. The sight of his son smiling again was more than money could ever buy. Emma turned slightly toward him. "He's still weak. The medicine needs to be given every 4 hours." Robert nodded. "You'll have everything you need. I've also hired a nurse to assist you at night." "Thank you," she said quietly. He hesitated. "Emma, I know I said I wanted you back as his caregiver, but I also want you to feel safe here. If you'd rather not stay under the same roof, I can make arrangements." Emma looked down for a moment. "I'm not afraid of this house, sir. I'm only afraid of lies. As long as the truth stays here, I'll stay too." Robert looked at her, realizing how much strength hid behind her calm voice. "You have my word," he said softly. That night, as the mansion grew quiet again, Emma stayed by Ethan's bedside. The boy fell asleep holding her hand. The sound of his breathing was soft and steady now. For the first time since everything happened, she allowed herself to close her eyes and rest. Downstairs, Robert sat in his study with a file open in front of him. He had been reading the report from his private investigator. Margaret's background wasn't clean. There were records of unpaid debts, old disputes with former employers, and connections to a man named Leon Briggs, a name that Robert didn't recognize. He rubbed his chin, his thoughts turning dark. "What were you really doing here, Margaret?" he whispered. He picked up his phone and called his investigator. "Find out everything you can about Leon Briggs. I want to know who he is, and how he got close to my housekeeper." The voice on the other end replied, "Understood, sir." Robert ended the call and looked around his empty office. The quiet that once comforted him now felt like a weight pressing on his chest. Upstairs, Emma woke suddenly to a soft sound. She sat up quickly. Ethan was still asleep, but the noise came from the hallway. She stepped out carefully, her feet light against the wooden floor. The hallway was dim, only lit by the moonlight slipping through the tall windows. At the far end, she saw movement, a shadow turning the corner. Her heart tightened. "Hello?" she called softly. No answer. She walked a few steps closer, her voice low. "Who's there?" The hallway remained silent. Then, something glimmered faintly on the floor. She bent down and picked it up, a small silver key. It was old, the kind used for locked drawers or private boxes. She looked at it for a moment, then slipped it into her pocket. The next morning, the house was brighter, but the tension stayed. Robert was already in the dining room when Emma came down with Ethan. The boy was smiling again, holding her hand tightly. "Good morning," Emma said quietly. Robert smiled faintly. "Good morning, Emma. You both look better." They sat together at the table. It was the first time they had shared breakfast since she was rehired. The sound of clinking spoons filled the silence. Ethan giggled softly when Emma helped him with his cereal, and Robert watched quietly. It felt like a family, something he hadn't felt in a long time. But just as peace began to settle, one of the guards entered the room. "Sir," he said, handing Robert a brown envelope, "this arrived early this morning. No name, just your address." Robert opened it slowly. Inside were printed photographs, still images from the night of the incident. One photo showed Emma lying unconscious beside the bed. Another showed a hand holding a syringe, half hidden by the doorframe. And one more, a close-up of Margaret's face, taken from a security angle. Emma froze as she looked at it. "That's her," she whispered. "She was there." Robert's eyes hardened. "Who sent these?" The guard shook his head. "No return address." He folded the photos back into the envelope. I want every camera in this house checked, and get me the rest of the footage from that night." After the guard left, Robert turned to Emma. She wasn't acting alone. Someone helped her. Someone inside this house. Emma frowned. "There's something else," she said quietly, pulling the silver key from her pocket. "I found this in the hallway last night." Robert took it carefully, studying it. "This looks like one of the old study drawer keys, the ones we don't use anymore." He stood up suddenly. "Stay here. I need to check something." He walked quickly to his study. Emma followed quietly behind. When he reached his desk, he opened the bottom drawer with the key. Inside were files, receipts, and letters. But one envelope caught his attention. It had his late wife's initials written on it, sealed with dust. He opened it slowly. Inside were hospital reports and a birth certificate. His hands began to shake as he read. The paper said Ethan's name, but under father, another name appeared. Emma saw the color drain from his face. "Mr. Foster, what is it?" He couldn't speak for a moment. His lips moved, but no sound came. Finally, he whispered, "This says I'm not Ethan's father." The room went silent. The papers slipped from his hand and fell to the floor. Emma's breath caught in her chest. "That can't be true." Robert sat down heavily, his face pale. "It's her handwriting. My wife. She must have hidden it before she died." Emma knelt beside him, picking up the papers gently. "You loved that boy since the day he was born. Nothing changes that." Robert covered his face with both hands. "Everything I believed in this house was built on lies. My marriage, my home, even my son's name." Emma placed her hand on his arm softly. "Maybe it's time to rebuild it on truth, sir, for Ethan's sake." Robert lifted his eyes slowly, meeting hers. "You still call me sir after everything I've done to you?" Emma gave a faint smile through her tears. "Respect doesn't die, even when hearts break." He looked at her, speechless, and for the first time in years, something inside him began to shift. The wall around his heart started to crack. Outside, the sky darkened again, and thunder rolled faintly in the distance. The truth had only just begun to surface, and both of them knew the storm was far from over. The storm that evening came without warning. The wind pressed against the tall windows of the Foster mansion, shaking the glass slightly. The lights flickered once, then steadied again. Inside, the house felt tense, like it was holding its breath. Robert Foster sat alone in his study. The papers from his late wife spread across the desk. The rain outside blurred the city lights. His hand rested over the birth certificate that had changed everything. He stared at the name under father, unable to look away. He whispered to himself, "Why didn't she tell me?" The door opened softly. Emma Lucy stepped inside, carrying a tray with tea. Her face was calm, though her eyes showed worry. "You haven't eaten since morning," she said gently. He looked up at her, exhausted. "How can I eat when everything I believed has turned into a lie?" Emma placed the tray on the table. "Not everything," she said quietly. "Ethan still needs you. He still calls you father. That's not a lie, Mr. Foster. That's love." Robert's eyes softened slightly. "You always see good where others see pain." She lowered her voice. "It's the only way I've survived." He gave a faint, broken smile, then looked down again. "I've spent years building a life around truth, and now I find out that even my marriage was built on a secret." He took a deep breath, his hands tightening on the edge of the desk. "And to think, I punished you for someone else's lie." Emma stood quietly beside him. "We all get blinded by fear, sir. What matters is what we do when the truth shows up." Robert looked at her closely, her voice calm, yet full of strength. He felt something in his chest he couldn't name. "You saved my son, Emma, and somehow, you're saving me too." Before she could answer, the doorbell rang sharply. The sound echoed through the hall. Robert frowned. "At this hour?" One of the guards came to the door. "Sir, there's someone here asking to speak with you. He says it's urgent." Robert nodded. "Send him in." A tall man in a dark coat stepped inside, his face half hidden under the light. "Mr. Foster?" he said in a firm voice. "My name is Leon Briggs." Robert's eyes narrowed. He remembered that name from the report. "I've been expecting to hear about you. Who are you, and why was my housekeeper in contact with you?" Leon looked around the room, then at Emma. "You should ask her to leave, sir. What I have to say isn't meant for everyone." Robert's voice grew sharp. "You can speak freely. She stays." Leon hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Fine. But what I'm about to tell you may change everything you think you know." He sat down opposite Robert, his voice calm but cold. "Margaret wasn't working alone. She was being paid to watch your house, to send information about your movements. She had debts, deep ones. I was one of the people collecting for her. But then someone higher up got involved. Someone who wanted to ruin you completely." Robert leaned forward. "Who?" Leon's eyes shifted to Emma. "A man who claimed to have a right to the boy." Emma froze. "Ethan?" "Yes," Leon said. "He said he was the child's real father." The room went silent. The ticking of the clock grew louder. Robert's face turned pale. "You mean the man whose name is on that paper?" Leon nodded. "Daniel Greer. He hired me to get information, to cause confusion, to create doubt between you and your staff. But I didn't know it would go this far. When the maid got attacked, I realized someone wanted to destroy her too. That's when I stepped away." Emma's voice shook. "So he's the one behind everything? The poison, the lies, the pictures?" "Yes," Leon said quietly. "But now he's desperate. Margaret ran off, and he's trying to cover his tracks. He knows the police are looking for her. He won't stop until he gets what he wants." Robert stood up suddenly. "Where is he now?" Leon hesitated. "He's here, in New York. I can help you find him, but I'm risking my life telling you this." Robert looked at Emma. "Get Ethan. We're leaving this house until I make sure it's safe." She nodded quickly and ran upstairs. Leon stood to leave, but before he reached the door, Robert stopped him. "Why tell me now?" Leon sighed. "Because I saw the footage. I saw what that woman did to the maid. And because I have a son too. Some things go beyond money." When he left, Robert stood still for a moment, the storm outside rumbling louder. He clenched his fists and whispered, "It ends tonight." Upstairs, Emma packed a small bag for Ethan. Her hands shook slightly as she folded his clothes. The boy looked up from his bed, confused. "Where are we going, Emma?" "Somewhere safe, sweetheart," she said gently. "Just for a while." He nodded slowly and held her hand. "Is Daddy coming?" "Yes, baby. He's right behind us." They walked down the stairs together. Robert met them at the door, coat already on. But just as they stepped outside, the headlights of a car flashed from the gate. A black SUV rolled in fast, stopping suddenly at the entrance. Two men stepped out. One of them, tall and stern-faced, walked straight toward Robert. "Mr. Foster?" he called. His tone was calm, almost polite. "I think we should talk." Robert frowned. "Who are you?" The man stopped under the porch light, his face finally visible. "Daniel Greer." The world seemed to slow. The sound of rain returned, soft and steady. Emma stood still, holding Ethan close. She had never seen the man before, but his eyes, his manner, carried something strange, a quiet sadness. Robert's voice was firm. "You shouldn't be here." Daniel's tone softened. "I didn't come for a fight, Robert. I came to see my son." Ethan looked up, confused. "Who's that?" Emma knelt down quickly and held him close. "It's okay, baby. Just stay with me." Robert stepped forward. "You have no right to come near him." Daniel sighed. "You think hiding him forever will erase the truth? I didn't know about him until a year ago. Your wife wrote to me before she died. I thought she was lying until I saw the papers." Robert's voice cracked with anger. "You let a woman die with a secret, and now you show up claiming a child you never raised." Daniel looked at him steadily. "You're right. I didn't raise him. But I'm not here to take him. I just want to see him once, to know he's happy." That's all." Emma stepped forward slowly. Her voice was gentle but firm. "This isn't the way, Mr. Greer. You came into this house through lies and pain. If you truly care, you'll walk away." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. His eyes softened. "You must be the maid, the one who almost died saving him." She didn't answer. He nodded slowly. "You're a good woman, better than the rest of us. I'll go." He turned back to his car, rain soaking his coat. Before getting in, he looked back at Robert. "I'll send the rest of the documents. They'll prove everything. But please, don't punish the boy for our mistakes." The SUV drove off into the storm, its taillights fading into the darkness. Robert stood there for a long moment, breathing hard. He looked at Emma, then at Ethan, who was staring up at him. "Daddy, who was that man?" Robert knelt down, his voice shaking. "Just someone from the past, son. Someone who doesn't matter anymore." Ethan hugged him tightly, and Robert closed his eyes. Inside the mansion, the lights flickered again, the storm raging harder outside. Emma closed the door and locked it, her heart still heavy. She turned to Robert. "Do you believe him?" Robert shook his head slowly. "I don't know what to believe anymore. But I do know this: that child upstairs is mine, no matter what paper says otherwise." Emma looked at him quietly, then whispered, "Then hold on to that truth, sir. Because people like him only come back when guilt eats them alive." Robert nodded, his jaw tight. "And if he tries to return, I'll be ready." But deep in his heart, he knew the past wasn't done with them yet. The storm outside was only the sound of something darker, approaching a truth that still had one more wound to open before healing could begin. The storm passed during the night, but the mansion felt heavier than before. The sound of the rain had stopped, yet the silence that followed carried its own kind of weight. The morning light fell through the curtains, soft and pale, touching the marble floor where drops of water still lingered from wet shoes and hurried steps. Emma Lucy stood by the window in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't tasted. Her eyes looked far past the garden, lost in thought. She hadn't slept. The image of Daniel Greer standing in the rain replayed again and again in her mind. His words, his face, the quiet sadness when he walked away. It all felt too strange, too heavy, like the truth had only half been spoken. Footsteps echoed behind her. She turned and saw Robert Foster walking in, still in the same clothes from the night before. His tie hung loose around his neck, his eyes tired, but calm. He stopped a few steps from her, his voice low. "You didn't sleep." She shook her head. "Neither did you." He gave a faint smile. "Seems the truth doesn't let anyone rest." She looked at him quietly. "Do you believe him?" Robert took a deep breath. "I believe he told the truth about being the biological father, but that doesn't make him Ethan's father. That title belongs to the one who stayed, not the one who arrived too late." Emma's eyes softened. "Then you already know your answer." He nodded slowly, but his voice broke slightly. "I just can't stop thinking about my wife. Why did she hide it? Why did she let me raise a son that wasn't mine without a word?" Emma placed her cup down and spoke gently. "Maybe because she knew you'd love him better than anyone else ever could. Maybe she knew the truth would destroy you, and she didn't want to see that." He looked at her for a long moment. "You make excuses for everyone, even the ones who hurt you." She smiled faintly. "Not excuses, sir, just reasons. People do wrong things for reasons they can't explain." He sat down at the table, his elbows resting on his knees. "I thought having money meant control. I thought it meant power, safety, respect. But last night I realized something. Emma." She tilted her head. "What's that?" He looked up at her with tired eyes. "Money builds walls, but love is what holds a home together." Her lips trembled, and for a moment she didn't speak. Then she said softly, "Ethan has both, sir. Don't lose what really matters, trying to protect what's already safe." Before Robert could reply, the sound of small footsteps filled the hall. Ethan appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas, clutching his small blanket. His voice was sleepy. "Emma, Daddy, are you okay?" Emma smiled gently and knelt to his level. "We're okay, sweetheart. Did the thunder scare you last night?" He nodded and walked closer. "I had a dream." Robert's voice softened. "What kind of dream, son?" Ethan blinked up at them. "A man said he was sorry. He said he didn't want to take me away. He just wanted me to be happy." Robert froze, and Emma's breath caught in her chest. "Did you see his face, baby?" Ethan nodded slowly. "He looked like Daddy, but sad." Robert reached out, resting his hand on his son's head. "You don't have to worry about that, Ethan. No one's taking you anywhere. You're home, and this is where you'll always stay." The boy smiled and wrapped his arms around both of them. Emma hugged him tightly, feeling tears fill her eyes. For a few seconds, time stood still, just the three of them, tangled together in a quiet that finally felt peaceful. Later that afternoon, Robert received a letter delivered by hand. It had no name, just an address. He opened it slowly, recognizing the handwriting. It was Daniel Greer. Inside was a single page. "Is greater than Robert? I've left New York for good. You have every right to raise him as your own. I was wrong to come back, wrong to let my guilt spill into your home. I see now that Ethan's heart already belongs to you and to the woman who risked her life for him. All I ask is that, when he's older, you tell him I didn't abandon him. I just gave him the better life he already had. Daniel." Robert read it twice, then folded it and placed it back into the envelope. He looked up at Emma, who was standing quietly by the door. "It's over," he said softly. "He's gone." Emma walked closer. "Then let the past go with him." He nodded. "Maybe it's time." In the days that followed, the mansion began to change. The cold air that once filled its halls was replaced with laughter again. Ethan recovered quickly, his smile returning brighter each day. He followed Emma everywhere, helping her water the plants, reading small storybooks by the fireplace. Robert often stood by the doorway, just watching, realizing how peace could look so simple. One afternoon, as the sun poured through the windows, Robert called Emma into the study. She walked in carefully, wiping her hands on her apron. "You needed me, sir?" He looked up from his desk, a gentle smile on his face. "Sit down, Emma." She hesitated, then sat across from him. "I've been thinking about everything that happened," he began slowly. "About the lies, the fear, the things I can't undo." He paused and reached into a drawer. He brought out a file and placed it in front of her. "This is something I want you to have." Emma frowned. "What is it?" He opened it to show a document with her name on it. "A new foundation," he said quietly. "It's called the Lucy Fund. It will help domestic workers who have been accused, mistreated, or silenced, just like you were." Her eyes widened. "Mr. Foster, I can't." He stopped her gently. "You can. You deserve this. You didn't just save my son's life. You changed both of ours." Her lips trembled, and tears filled her eyes. "I only did what any mother would do." He smiled faintly. "Then let the world see what a mother's heart can do." For a moment, neither spoke. Then, slowly, he reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. She didn't pull away. The silence between them was full, warm, and real. In the corner of the room, Ethan peeked through the half-open door, smiling when he saw them together. He ran in suddenly and hugged Emma's waist. "Daddy says you're our hero," he said, grinning. Emma laughed softly, holding him close. "No, baby, we're all heroes. We just don't always wear capes." Robert looked at them both and nodded. "He's right. You saved us, Emma." That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, the three of them stood by the balcony overlooking the city. The air was calm, the sky painted gold. Ethan leaned against Emma, his small hand holding hers. Robert stood beside them, his arm resting lightly around her shoulders. For the first time in years, the mansion didn't feel like a place of secrets anymore. It felt like a home, simple, human, and alive. Emma looked at Robert and said softly, "You know, sir, I used to think life was about survival, but now I see it's about love. Real love, the kind that forgives, the kind that stays." Robert smiled quietly, his voice tender. "And I used to think power was control, but now I see power is kindness." Ethan looked up at both of them. "So we're a family now?" Emma glanced at Robert. He nodded gently. "Yes, son, we always were." The wind brushed softly through the curtains behind them as the light faded. The storm that once tore them apart had passed, leaving behind something stronger than blood, a love born out of truth, forgiveness, and the courage to start again. And in that quiet moment, as the city lights flickered to life in the distance, the Foster mansion finally exhaled the peace it had waited for all along. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that family isn't built by blood, but by love, forgiveness, and truth. No matter how broken the past may be, kindness has the power to heal what money never can. If this story touched your heart, tell us what you learned from it and where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so more people can experience these emotional stories of love, hope, and redemption. And remember, sometimes the people we least expect become the ones who save us.